Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, and diving straight away into the second segment, talking about this discussion I've been thinking about over the last few days with the quarterback market and deciding how these quarterbacks really just get their extensions over the last few days. Really mentioning Trevor Lawrence and how he has reset the market based on, really, in my opinion, how just based on all the other teams, he's getting an extension because the Jaguars don't want to be left to last in figuring out their quarterback situation. So Lawrence joins Jared Goff as the only other quarterback to agree to an extension this offseason. Jared Goff got his contract extension, giving him $53 million per year. Then you have Trevor Lawrence, who exceeds Jared Goff's contract, and he now makes tied for first in the NFL at $55 million with Joe Burrow for the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. As a starter, I do give the Jacksonville Jaguars credit because I agree in the standpoint of figuring out your contract situation first before anything else, to just get it out of the way, to focus on football. You don't have this dragging on the entire offseason, potentially into the regular season. I don't want that. I credit the Jaguars for getting it all situated, getting it all fixed, and doing that before anybody else. I agree with that point. But at the same time, $55 million for Trevor Lawrence. Are we judging these quarterbacks and how much money we just give out to these guys based on what they have done, the production they've given us, and projecting what they can be? Is that really the benchmark anymore? Or at least seems that it is trending that way based on this contract, based on what Tua could get, on what Jordan Love could get, and just these other quarterbacks around the NFL. Seemingly, it seems that the Jaguars, the Packers, and the Dallas Cowboys are just watching what each of them does, and then if they could agree to something with their quarterback first before any of the other teams, they're going to go ahead and do it because they're more afraid of what could happen afterwards. Maybe they pay a little bit more, maybe they lose their quarterback and now they're left without other options, and those are obviously massive problems to have. But again, I think it all just depends on the situation. Just starting off with Jared Goff, over the last 2 years, to me, he was worth the investment of $53 million per year, because if you look at the last two seasons, in 2022, he has given you over 4,400 passing yards, at least 29 touchdowns in both seasons, and also has thrown no more than 12 interceptions in each season, with a QBR no less than 60 in each of those 2 years. And now, those are great numbers to have. You look at the playoff performances and how the Lions are trending upwards in trajectory since they got Jared Goff and building the team around him, around Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, all these young guys, but really with Jared Goff as the centerpiece and being that driving force, that leader out there on the field. He, to me, was worth that investment because the Lions have tried other quarterbacks so far before this Jared Goff era, and it hasn't really worked. Dan Campbell and the Lions bet a lot on Jared Goff, and he turned out very well. You see how close they were to reaching a Super Bowl in this second year with the Lions. So to me, that is worth the investment of nearing the highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Not to say that he even got there. He was around there, and I think any Lions fan, anybody in the NFL could agree with that, even because it just fits for the Detroit Lions. But now talking about Trevor Lawrence and giving him $55 million, you look at some of the things that surround Trevor Lawrence and some of the stats and just information of what he has done so far in the NFL. He has never thrown more than 25 touchdowns in a single year. He just led the NFL with 21 giveaways last season. And I know it's easy to pick out some of these stats that talk down on him. Of course, there is those facts that he led that great comeback in the playoffs. Not this past playoff, but the one before that against the Los Angeles Chargers. That was remarkable. That was top-tier quarterback play. And also, he is almost at the top of a lot of Jacksonville Jaguars stats in franchise history. So there is a lot of positives as well. Just depends on the perspective that you take with Trevor Lawrence. But if you're comparing him to other quarterbacks, just look at someone like Daniel Jones. You look at Daniel Jones and his numbers compared to Jared Goff's in their first 50 starts or through their first 50 games. They're very similar. There's not a huge discrepancy with how Daniel Jones has performed and how Trevor Lawrence has performed. Of course, they've each had to go through different circumstances. Daniel Jones dealing with a bunch of injuries, a lot of coaches coming in and out. Trevor Lawrence having to deal with Urban Meyer that first year, then transitioning to Doug Peterson, having a bit of a smoother transition, not really dealing with a lot of injuries like Daniel Jones has had. But I don't think it's fair to some sense when you're talking about Daniel Jones and people constantly just kill him based on his performances, that he's not good enough for the Giants, they lose because of him, they need to find and draft another quarterback, he's not the answer. But Trevor Lawrence is doing seemingly the same thing, at least production-wise, with the stats, and arguably with a better team. I wouldn't say arguably, definitely a better team in the Jacksonville Jaguars, but similar sort of production from both of them, but talked about in very different lights are each quarterback. So that's one thing. And I do acknowledge the opposite side, like I mentioned. Without a decent quarterback, the Jaguars have sort of built this thing around Trevor Lawrence, drafting him number 1 overall. So you would have to restart that progress, and you don't know how long it will be before you find another starting quarterback. That's always the biggest fear. And you will potentially pay more if you wait for Tua and Jordan Love to get an extension, probably Dak Prescott as well. But I only say potentially because this is where you have to take a little bit of a risk. I would imagine if I was in this position in the Jacksonville Jaguars front office and I'm thinking, all right, we have to pay Trevor Lawrence. At the end of the day, I would probably extend Trevor, because throwing yourself out there into the big unknown and not knowing who your next quarterback is going to be, that is a scary thought. And being a Steelers fan, I know how bad it could get. So I would want to extend Trevor Lawrence, right? That's the idea. But you have to take it and contextualize it in a way where you're looking at the competition. And this is where the biggest point of this whole discussion comes in that I'm trying to make, is that you look at around the NFL and teams are looking, if you're the Jaguars, you're looking at the Dolphins, you're looking at the Cowboys, and you're looking at the Packers. You're just wanting to get a deal done just based on the fact that they might get more money. They might extend them to $55 million, maybe more than that. And you don't want to be left out and have to pay a lot more for Trevor Lawrence, completely bypassing the idea that has he earned 55, maybe even more than that we can give him? At what point do you ask, are we paying what he has done so far, or are we just paying because we don't want to be the last one to extend our quarterback? I think that's a legitimate question that the NFL is sort of trending into the direction now with these quarterback extensions. And if you're looking around, if I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, again, I'm looking and I'm thinking, I'm not paying Tua, Jordan Love, probably not even Dak Prescott if I'm the Dallas Cowboys, $55 million. There's no way they get paid that much, because similar to Trevor Lawrence, Tua just had the best year of his career. Led the Dolphins to an 11-6 record. They had a very good regular season, but then once you get to the playoffs, they stunk up the joint. So is he already, after 1 year, earned himself enough around $50 to $55 million? I would probably say no. Then you have Jordan Love, who I think is the closest to that value, just because you are projecting, so you maybe most likely think that he is going to be a top-tier quarterback based on the talent around him, leading this young team, exceeding all expectations. All right, maybe he could get close to that. But again, I don't think after just 1 year the Packers are paying him $55 million per year, or say even more than that at that point after 1 year. I don't think they're doing that. Then even with the Dallas Cowboys, it's one thing if Dak hits free agency and he gets that, maybe even more from a different team that needs a quarterback to really compete, to take that next step. All right, I can accept that. If it's a bidding war, the highest team wins, and if they pay him more than 55, that's fine, because you want Dak, you need a quarterback, that's the final piece of your puzzle. But if you're the Cowboys, I'm not paying Dak 55, because I think CeeDee probably deserves close to what Justin Jefferson's got, and I know Micah Parsons is going to want close to what Nick Bosa has in $34 million per year. We can't afford to have all three of them. And again, like I talked about in the last segment, with Dak, CeeDee, and Micah, if you're to kick one of those players off and have to keep the other two, is it crazy to say that Dak would probably be the least likely to stay on the Cowboys based on the asking price and based on the value of the other two? I don't think so. And then, like I mentioned, if he hits free agency and somebody pays him more than that, that's fine. But it all depends on the situation you're faced with as of now. And also, not to mention, with Trevor and looking at Tua, Dak, and Love, I wouldn't pay them $55 million, but the fact that Trevor got that, and all three of them had a better season last year than Trevor Lawrence, again, just raises the question, are we just doing this based on production, or just based on the fact that the quarterback can ask for near top of the market price, knowing that the team that he's on has to get it done, or else they risk paying a lot more than they really want to give up. It's sort of shifting in the favor of these players, like most, I guess, other sports where the players have a lot of power in deciding their team, a lot of their contracts. I really just think of the NBA and how much power those players have in the league and deciding that they want to move to a certain team, or just deciding on some contracts and the supermax and all that sort of stuff. The NFL hasn't really been like that up until, I think, the last year or so, where I think more and more players are getting a lot more power in deciding some of these contracts and deciding big decisions in free agency. Like you saw this past free agent period with Kirk Cousins, decided not to sign, bet on himself, went out in free agency and got top of the line money. Again, did he deserve that much money already for from the Atlanta Falcons? You could say yeah, just because of how long he has played, what he has put on tape, but coming off an injury, new team, and just a lot of newness with a young team coming off that injury, there are still some doubts there, but more and more I think we're starting to see some players head into that limelight of controlling their own destiny, and it just seems that teams are paying these quarterbacks based on other teams' actions rather than their own evaluation of, all right, have they done enough to earn this contract? Are they potentially going to get better and take us to new heights? Or are we going to just see the same results over and over again? You could say, I know Trevor Lawrence has only played 3 years, so to be fair to him, he could get a lot better. He could, get this Jaguars team to the playoffs, contention for conference championships. That is still not impossible, but again, I asked the question, how much better can he get? And can he get that much better to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL? I don't think anyone has any facts or any real information to show me or tell me that he can get to that level based on anything that he's done so far. What are you basing that thought of, that he can get to the level of being the highest paid quarterback in the NFL? I think Burrow has earned that to be the highest paid because he has beat the monster in the AFC. He has beaten Patrick Mahomes in those playoffs. He has gone to a Super Bowl. Every time he plays more than 16 to 17 or 16 to 15 games, the Bengals make it to at least a conference championship. That's the level that I think would deem a $55 million contract to be the highest paid quarterback in the league. But Trevor has only made the playoffs once. He has one playoff win, but then last year, bad season overall for the Jaguars. So I don't know. I'm still left in a lot of doubts on how these teams decide on these contracts. It is the market. I know money talks. Obviously, the finances have a massive pull on what teams decide, but I don't know. It's just a weird situation for me. I would have a hard time paying these quarterbacks a lot of money. I know as far as the fear of not having a starting quarterback is and goes, but it's just weird. I don't know if I could do it. I would probably do it, honestly. Just to have a starting quarterback, but I would have trouble sleeping at night, that's for sure. I will definitely not be too happy and be very nervous until that quarterback proves me right. But that's the market. That's the kind of world we're living in the NFL. So who will be the next quarterback to get paid? That's yet to be determined. I know one of them is going to get paid before training camp. I have that feeling, so we're just going to have to wait and see. But that'll do it for this segment. And in the meantime, we will head to another break. And on the other side of that, we're going to talk about some more contract negotiations, this time with a wide receiver in Brandon Ayuk and how he has potentially revealed that those contract negotiations are done. There are no more going forward with those contract negotiations based on a TikTok video that was released today. Stick around to find out more of those details when we return after this short break.